Dokkan Discourse has inspired a lot of pretty funny conversations about character strength, fumbles, mids, and yada yada yada. Chief among them are characters like the Int LR Triku, who stands to be possibly the worst character ever released in his context, being the third base Goku in a year and the worst one of that. His partner in crime is the same year LR AGL Omega Shenron, who has a condition that would actually be amazing in 2024, needing a full team of GT bosses because of how powerful the characters have been this year. If they would have given Omega Shenron the Broly treatment, he'd be an all-time fun unit. But that begs the question, what makes characters like Triku or Omega Shenron poorly designed? Is it just them being released so weak? I don't think so. I'm beating a dead horse when I say this, but the blue duo, Mr. and Mr. Saiyans Have No Limits, are a poorly designed character. And you might say, how can that be? They were good for Fusion Zamasu when they released. Sure, I have no problem with that, but what I do have a problem with is how overtly Dokkan slants units to H out. Vegito is a popular unit. People wanted access to a modern Vegito that they could use at will. What they got instead was a conditional merchant that in retrospect looks set up to fail. These two lines in particular are obnoxious. There's an inherent risk to putting a character in slot 1 because a boss can attack them before they can activate things like super effects, multiplicative buffs, etc. What they gave this character as a holdover is the ability to flatly dodge so long as they're in slot 1. Okay, the issue is this is a natural RNG limit. 50% of the time, you will dodge 1 attack. 1 out of every 8 times, you will dodge like 3 attacks. And something like 1 out of every 32 times, you will watch them dodge 5 attacks in a row. So, the obvious answer is to duck them into slot 2, where they can build up their defenses with additionals nowadays, since their stats are no longer elite for the content. Well, here comes problem 2. Their 12 key stacks attack and their 18 key stacks defense. This is, again, remarkably obtuse because it functionally states that you have an upper limit on what this character will be consistently capable of. The final nail in the aging coffin is pretty obvious then. An HP conditional to access the only highlight of the character after a few months of testing is super fucking weird. 70% HP on potentially turn 5, and if you don't hit it, then the only defensive mechanics remaining is a no safety net guardless dodge or die situation because your flat defense wasn't being boosted by 12 key supers. A myriad of stipulations that felt designed to empty your stone count before releasing content that quickly locked them away for good. Sure, you can still see runs on Twitter highlighting some fun turns, but overall, this is classic 2023 Dokkan. This is going to springboard me into my biggest gripe with the Dokkan Battle dev team, which is the lack of foresight when designing for a team game. Follow me here. Beast Gohan was the best character in the game for most of the year, as of very, very recently. The gap between him and other characters was pretty vast, maybe minus Cell Max, who was like Beast Gohan but worse. The issue with Beast Gohan is he is amazingly powerful right now, but what he does is sort of uninteresting numbers. When Beast Gohan was the best character in the game, people said that he made the game boring. While it's not always fun to lose, the way he wins is simply by existing on the rotation. For 8 months out of the year, you could leave him in slot 1, and there was literally nothing the enemy could do to affect him, which meant you were on average making less decisions in a turn. I know that people talk about the simplicity of Dokkan, it's a bubble popping game and so on, but I think that removing choice from a game is still almost always bad for its health. One day, and we're going to start seeing it, Beast Gohan is going to age out, and it's not going to be a particularly fun one for people who love the character, because the kit is steeped in number versus number. It's going to escalate to him getting hit hard and the numbers not being on his side. You might come to say that, hey Lone, you're just describing aging out, this is a gotcha, characters are going to age out, yada yada yada. And of course, I'm not saying that characters aren't going to age out or that any character is immune to the creep of time, but I am under the impression that the worldwide download celebration this year created the single best team I've personally seen, even watching old videos, even watching new videos. I think the Team Legendary Super Saiyan Broly Uncontrollable Power Team is amazing for more than just powerful characters. The thing that makes this team elite in an interesting way is that unlike Superheroes was the best team in the game, and it was so obtuse and you could do whatever you wanted so long as you just kept Beast Gohan in slot 1, you would never lose a run because how could you? Unless you were trying to lose a run by putting the gammas somewhere they shouldn't be, if you were focusing the gammas for fun, you basically couldn't lose. The thing that's interesting about this team is that you're using Int Broly's domain. You cannot use his domain. You can stall it so you can get extra turns. You can use it immediately to buffer your team into a advantageous position so they're under no threat as they take attacks and maybe the boss does a lot of damage up front. But if you pop immediately, you might be wasting LR Carnival Tech Broly's first turn, which is basically unkillable, so maybe you want to put him in slot 1 and again save the domain. It's a choice you can make. LR Janemba released, and you can focus him as a carry, sort of putting him in first slot or second slot and, dodging in and out with Boo and using big bad bosses. You give the team an entire new life essentially. You have to float off Easy A Tech Broly, but sometimes he can stay on rotation. Sometimes the rotation is such that you can't really float him off because another unit can't take the pressure in slot 2. he's protected by that uncontrolled May, that's when you use the domain. You can't just have a revive up all the time, because if you did, he would have already transformed, so you have a decision to make there. If you're like me and you don't have Cell Max, maybe you bring Super Easy A Broly, or Fat Boo, or AGL Broly, or, you know, the free-to-play Bio Broly. And these characters each have their strengths and weaknesses. Much like Super Easy A Broly, he seems perfect until you realize that he's kind of a lose condition. He can take a lot of damage. That said, you keep him on rotation, you keep him floating, you keep him supporting, and you can keep him safe away from a ton of pressure while building up his multiplicative passive. You introduce Fat Boo to the equation. He can revive, and if he doesn't, he still has his Boo Beam. That's a Ghost Suster. He's stacking. He's in slot 3, which is usually taking the least amount of pressure. All these things compound in an interesting way, and an interesting amount of decisions and links and which characters you want to put where. And it's super healthy for the game, even if it seems like character strong. Even now, as we're a few months out on global, when new events come out, I still almost always just use a Tech UI Goku team, a superhero team, a Universe 7 team, because the characters don't require much tinkering. They're going to dodge, they're going to be super strong, they're going to revive, and eventually they're just going to win the fight without having to really pause and look at the rotations. You just put AGL UI Goku in slot 1, Tech UI wherever, Tech UI goes into slot 1, wherever, Evo Vegeta gets hit, wherever. It's just all of these things compound in a way that aren't really that interesting, because not only are they stats, they're just a bunch of effects that kind of are self-interested. Meanwhile, if I'm honest, a character like EZA Tech Broly is particularly good because of the characters he has around him. He's allowed to do his specific job because the characters around him allow him to operate with this safety net, this zone of protection, these revives, these target mechanics, these ghost ushers. They allow him to be the character that just pumps out those 100 million damage stats. And the difference between a character like him and any character like anyone on superheroes, anyone who's just protected by Beast Gohan, for example, is that yes, they might have revives on the team, yes, they might have target mechanics on the team, but Tech LR EZA Broly is sometimes a lose condition. He can't sustain himself. He needs the help of his others. For whatever reason, there's this odd thing that happens with super characters where they're all just sort of made perfect, whereas the villains are all helping each other to a common goal. Int LR Broly isn't as good if he doesn't have an absolute monster like EZA LR Tech Broly in slot 2 decimating the boss. He does need that damage. The only character I can really think of on the super side that behaves like this right now is the Gohan, Goku, and Trunks from the same celebration, which if you've watched anything by me, you've heard me harp on them a lot. I think they're amazingly designed because what they do is, even though they have a big nuke, even though they're pretty slot 1 defensive themselves, that will age out eventually, but they will still provide necessary support for characters that need it. They are helping and bringing teams together with the cohesion that these villain teams seem to be doing. The reason a lot of times super units are called mid when they release, if they're not strong enough, is because they're always so bare bones. They're always just the biggest numbers, the biggest support, the most confirmed dodges. It's very rarely that the super units are working towards a whole, a singular team in the same way that the Broly team does. You can think of the Broly team sort of being constructed like a MOBA team where Tech EZA Broly is protected by his supports and then he carries the fight. And you can tell this is a thing because people love stacking characters. The reason people love stacking characters is they want their character, their big shiny character, to feel like a carry the same way that EZA LR Tech Broly does. Similarly, you see people saying that Janemba doesn't belong on the Broly team because he has no place, or that he's so much worse than the Gogeta EZA because he has no place. But there's no world where you run the LR Bio Broly free-to-play unit or the Super EZA Strength Broly if you have Janemba, because all he does is make the team better, whereas these other characters have the potential to make them worse. But because he's not Gogeta, because he's not doing 100 million attack stats, people think, oh, he got the short end of the stick, when in reality, these super teams could have used like a cool carry like Gogeta. Ultimately, Gogeta, the EZA Gogeta has ended up just being the best character in the game, so whatever. I mean, classic super unit. Janemba just completely fits into a team and makes every single villain team better and more consistent. If there's one thing people don't speak about enough currently, is that Dokkan is doing really well with creating villain teams. They're just doing better with creating super units. I would go as far as to say that every super unit that's top tier right now is still better in a vacuum than every villain unit, give or take. The only difference is these villain units fill out an impossibly powerful team, whereas every super unit is just a very strong super unit. You really have to look no further than 9th anniversary Gogeta. He's off the team, not because he's weak now. It's because why not just run the better orb changers? But that's going to be it for me for now. Like if you like the video, subscribe to join the club. I've been long. You gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. We gonna make it. Peace.